Fog coiled like smoke through the trees as dawn broke over Devil's Edge Ridge. The silence was the kind that settled deep, broken only by the rustle of pine needles under boots and the occasional sharp cry of a hawk overhead. Megan Carver tugged her jacket tighter and squinted into the thick mist rolling off the ridgeline. Something didn't feel right. She wasn't the type to spook easily, not anymore, not after what Columbia had cost her. The Smoky Mountains had become her quiet punishment and her retreat, working alone, answering to no one, maintaining a patch of wilderness few dared trek without permits or common sense. For the past 3 years, that isolation had been her shield. Then she heard it. Faint, almost delicate, like something dragging through underbrush. Megan stopped mid-stride, listened. Another shuffle, closer now. She reached for the sidearm holstered at her thigh, thumb ready on the safety. This ridge had seen its share of meth runners, illegal poachers, and God knew what else. Whatever was out there wasn't trying to hide, and then, out of the swirling fog, it appeared. A German shepherd. Big, powerful, caked in dirt and dried blood. Limbs trembling with every step, ribs sharply outlined beneath its matted coat. But what stopped Megan cold wasn't its condition. It was the tactical harness strapped to its body. Military issue, heavy-duty buckles, and on its back a mud-covered pack sealed tight. The dog saw her and didn't flinch. It didn't growl, didn't bark. It just stared with those sharp amber eyes, then stepped forward and dropped to its haunches, panting hard. The weight of the pack sagged across its frame. Megan lowered her weapon but didn't let go. "What the hell are you?" she muttered. The shepherd took one last breath, pushed the pack forward with its snout, and collapsed. For a long moment Megan didn't move. The only sound was the slow, wheezing breath from the dog and the soft creak of her jacket as she knelt beside it. "Easy there, soldier," she whispered, voice gentler now. "Where'd you crawl out from?" The harness was clean cut, no tags, no insignia. But the stitching along the inner strap had a faded serial code and a tattoo on the inner hind leg, D214. Military K9, no doubt. But there hadn't been any joint operations in this sector. No call-ins, nothing on her tracker. She unclipped the pack. It was heavier than it looked. Dense. Inside was a waterproofed container locked with a biohazard seal. She flipped it carefully. No exterior labels, just the universal red triangle. A tiny LED flashed green, indicating optimal temperature. Next to it, nestled in foam padding, was a military-grade tablet with a biometric scanner. And wedged into the seam of the case was a flash drive. On it, someone had scrawled in thick black ink, "To M. Carver, lives depend on you." Megan stared at the name. Not Ranger Carver, not Agent Carver, just the letter, the old one. Her pulse spiked, but her hand stayed steady. It had been 5 years since anyone used that name seriously. Not since the DHS operation that tore her career to shreds and left 2 people dead. She looked back at the shepherd. Its eyes flickered open again. He watched her, not pleading, not afraid, just watching, like he already knew her answer before she did. "All right," she sighed, "let's get you home." Her ranger cabin sat a half-mile down the trail, tucked between 2 pines and a rock bluff. Remote, secure, built for solitude, not visitors. Especially not wounded K9s carrying military secrets. She laid the shepherd gently on an old wool blanket near the stove. He didn't resist, just groaned low and stayed still, save for a twitch of the ear as she moved. She opened a can of tuna, closest thing to meat in the pantry, and offered it on a plate. He didn't touch it at first, then ate slowly, as if manners had been drilled into muscle memory. Delta, she said suddenly, the name spilling out of nowhere. That's what I'll call you. You look like a Delta. The dog, Delta, blinked, then lowered his head onto his paws. Megan turned to the table where she'd laid out the contents of the pack. The vials inside the sealed container shimmered faintly, pale gold against the silver foam casing. She didn't need a lab to guess what they were. Neurotoxins. One vial had been cracked just enough to catch a trace of scent. Sharp, acidic, with a bitter undertone. Not snake venom, something rarer, possibly synthetic, definitely dangerous. She plugged the flash drive into her offline laptop. No internet, no tracking. She had her routines. An encrypted file auto-launched. Access requires biometric confirmation. She leaned back. Whoever sent this knew her well, and they wanted her attention. Her eyes drifted back to Delta, already sleeping deeply. The kind of sleep only earned after a hellish journey. He had delivered something no one else could, a mission she hadn't asked for. A name she'd buried years ago. Megan Carver wasn't supposed to be part of anything anymore. She was just a park ranger now. Quiet, forgotten, disgraced, and yet. That flash drive burned in her hand like a challenge. She took a breath, clicked the confirmation key. A new screen appeared. Black background, white text. You were right, Carver. Columbia wasn't an accident. Watch this, then decide. The storm hadn't let up by the time Megan reached Brody's clinic. Rain lashed sideways across the gravel lot, wind clawing at her jacket as she hoisted Delta from the passenger seat. He was lighter than she'd expected, lean and all muscle, but his deadweight slump made the carry awkward. Dr. Elijah Brody opened the clinic door before she could knock, already wiping his hands on a stained towel. You weren't kidding, he muttered, stepping aside to let her through. Military harness, half-starved, and hauling a sealed pack. Damn. Megan laid Delta on the exam table as gently as she could. He collapsed in front of me, just gave out. But not before he shoved the backpack into my legs like he was trying to pass it off. Brody arched a brow, kneeling beside the table. That right? What did you find? She hesitated, then unslung the pack and opened it. You're not going to believe it. He squinted as she lifted the case from its compartment. The biohazard seal caught the overhead light. Brody's lips tightened. Jesus, Megan. I know. While Delta was hooked up to fluids and sedatives, Megan paced the tiny room like the walls were closing in. She didn't want to talk about Columbia, about Travers, about the op that shattered her name. But when Brody gently asked, "You think this is connected?" she gave the only answer she could. Yeah. And worse, I think it's about to happen again. Once Delta stabilized, Brody moved to the pack and carefully examined the military-grade tablet. Its screen flickered but remained locked behind biometric security. That's no standard-issue tech, he muttered, brushing dried mud from its edges. And it's still warm, like it was recently used. Megan's stomach churned. It might be coded to my biometrics. Travers used to have all our field gear rigged that way, paranoid as hell. Sounds like he had reason. She touched the pad. The screen stayed dark for a second, then blinked awake with a low chime. A familiar sequence, authentication complete, rolled across it. A video file auto-launched. There he was, Director Cole Travers. Grainy footage, low-res, but unmistakable. His voice cracked through the speakers like gravel. If you're watching this, Carver, that dog made it to you. Which means I didn't. Brody's eyes shot to Megan. She didn't blink. Travers leaned forward in the frame, pale, clearly wounded. Columbia wasn't a screw-up. You didn't fail. We were burned from the inside. Sentinel betrayed us all. He laid it out. The real mission. The real enemy. Project Sentinel. A splinter operation within DHS. had been trafficking high-yield neurotoxins harvested from rare wildlife, masking them as environmental research. When Megan's team started getting too close to a transport hub in Bogotá, they'd set her up as the fall. They needed a scapegoat, Travers said. You were loyal, clean, too clean. That made you dangerous. The screen froze on Travers's strained face. Megan's fists clenched. Brody was silent for a long moment. Then he gestured toward Delta, who had started to stir. And the dog? Project Sentinel used military K-9S for field delivery. Covert courier missions. If he's from that unit and they ghosted him, he's carrying intel they didn't want traced. As if on cue, Delta whined and lifted his head, his eyes locked with Megan's. Still with us, she murmured, kneeling beside him. You made it. Back at her cabin, Megan contacted someone she hadn't spoken to in years. Lexi Moore answered after 2 rings. Well, hell, the woman said, her voice dry and amused. Didn't think I'd hear from you unless DHS got amnesia. Megan grunted. I need your eyes on something. You still live in that trailer behind the wildlife sanctuary? Still running my server farm on generator fumes, yeah. What kind of something? Encrypted tablet. Biohazard case. Dog with black ops training. A beat of silence. Then, be here in 20. When Megan pulled up, Delta resting in the back seat, Lexi was already outside, dressed in a NASA hoodie and camo cargo pants, waving a tablet like a wand. Her dark hair was tied up in a knot, and a lit cigarette dangled from her lips. I hope you brought whiskey, Lexi said. This sounds like one of your cursed DHS fairy tales. Inside the cramped trailer, Lexi's hands flew across keyboards. Her eyes scanned code like she was reading poetry. Tablet's got a custom DHS build, she said. Old-school Sentinel architecture, no external access, air-gapped, biometric locked, but I can piggyback your clearance from the original boot sequence. Won't be clean, but it'll open. What's on it? Megan asked. Lexi leaned back, exhaled smoke, and grinned. A whole lot of ghosts. Data burst onto the screen. Shipment manifests. Species lists. Financial ledgers coded in innocuous wildlife grant terms. Then they found the flash drive. Encrypted with a passphrase only Megan would recognize. Redwood 17. Her old field badge ID. When Lexi cracked it open, it revealed another video. This one shorter. Travers again, looking even more worn. They're moving a new shipment out of the country in 72 hours, he said. Bioweapon-grade venom harvested from 3 rare species. The package includes Anka. You remember her, she's still alive. Megan's breath caught. And one more thing, Travers added. They're going to frame you, again. Your ID's in the transfer manifest. Your name's already flagged on an internal DHS list as compromised. They'll use it to explain the leak. The screen went black. Lexi swore. They're still using your ID after everything? They want me to look like I never stopped running, Megan whispered, that I've been helping them all along. Lexi rubbed her temples. This isn't just corruption. This is full-bore systemic rot. Megan nodded, and it's time someone cleaned house. Outside, the rain had faded to a drizzle, but the storm inside Megan's chest was only getting started. The sky above Devil's Edge turned the color of old steel as Megan Carver knelt by the edge of a half-flooded trail, scanning the moss-covered slope below. Delta stood alert beside her, nostrils flaring gently, his tail held straight, his body tense with purpose. He knows something, Lexi whispered, crouched nearby with a weather-stained map. That's not just tracking, that's memory. They had been following Delta's lead for over 3 hours, past familiar ranger trails, across deer runs, through waist-high brush, and a collapsed fire road no longer marked on any recent topography. Lexi's GPS had gone dead 15 minutes ago. Megan hadn't needed it. Delta had something better, scent, and memory. Whatever had been done to train him, it was buried deep in bone and instinct. "I trust him," Megan said, adjusting her jacket. "Let's move." They followed Delta into the hollow of the woods. The air thickened with pine and decay. Dead leaves crunched underfoot as they descended into a bowl of stone and root, eventually revealing a moss-camouflaged bunkered door set into the hillside. Megan drew her cig instinctively, the weight of her old life settling on her shoulders like it had never left. Lexi crept to the side, running a hand along the faint outline of a digital lock. "This is military-grade, old DHS or paramilitary, not supposed to exist out here." Megan nodded. "Exactly why it does." Delta padded forward, stood at the door, and gave a low, almost imperceptible bark. A memory, a signal. He knew this place. Megan punched a code into the panel, one of the emergency keys from her old DHS days. The pad blinked red, then green. The door unsealed with a soft hiss. Inside, it smelled like metal and time. The bunker had been sealed tight, but power still hummed faintly. Emergency lights flickered on. In the main chamber, a work table was stacked with waterproof cases, each marked with a now familiar logo, Sentinel Group. Lexi exhaled. Jesus, this was one of their field stations. Megan crossed the room, flipping open a black case filled with laminated data sheets, drone footage stills, biological sample tubes, and schematics. "A dead drop," Megan muttered. "One of the last places not scrubbed clean when they ghosted Project Sentinel." Delta padded over to a locker. He whined once, then pawed the lower panel. Megan knelt, pried it open, and pulled out a weathered storage drive. Taped to it was a photo, yellowed and creased, but unmistakable. A white-faced Capuchin with soulful black-ringed eyes. The name Anka scrawled across the bottom. Megan stared. "I tried to get her out," she murmured. 5 years ago in Colombia. That mission, it wasn't supposed to go south. She was supposed to make it." Lexi looked over her shoulder. "That's the primate you got pinned for trafficking. The one they said never existed." Megan nodded slowly. "She existed. She still does." Lexi turned toward the corner of the bunker, where a satellite receiver blinked erratically. She flicked open her portable rig and got to work. While she connected to what little was left of the DHS Ghost Network, Megan sifted through files. Logs of toxin shipments, coded personnel rosters, and security access maps. She froze when she reached a blueprint labeled Wildgate Research Facility. A red ink annotation had been scratched across the header. Georgia Line. Primary Toxin Hub. Anka held. Lexi whistled under her breath. "I decrypted a message fragment. There's an outbound transport scheduled in 72 hours. Destination unknown, but it's international. They're moving Anka." A sudden static crackled from Lexi's comm unit. Then came the garbled voice of Dr. Elijah Brody. "Megan, something's wrong. Clinic, breached. Men looking for a dog. Get..." The feed cut to silence. Megan's stomach twisted. She turned to Delta. "You led them right, but they were watching. They followed you." Lexi stared, pale. "What do we do?" "We go to him, now." They made it back to the truck in record time. Delta leaping into the back without hesitation. The drive to Brody's clinic took 30 minutes. Too long. Smoke curled from the corner of the barn when they arrived. A broken window gaped open like a wound. Megan rushed inside. "Brody!" A moan came from the back room. They found him bleeding from the temple, bruised ribs, slumped beside an overturned steel table. "I'm okay," he coughed. "They wanted the dog, asked about you too, Megan. One of them had a tattoo, same logo as that dog's harness." Lexi helped stabilize him as Megan looked down at Delta, who sat like stone beside the doorway, ears flat, eyes burning. "They know he delivered the payload," Megan said. "They didn't expect him to survive." Brody took a breath. "You need to go. Now they'll be watching the roads." Megan nodded and stood. "Lexi, grab everything we downloaded. We've got one shot to stop them before they vanish again." Lexi slung the laptop bag over her shoulder. "Where?" "To the Georgia line," Megan said, "to the lab." As they turned to leave, Brody caught Megan's hand. "That dog, he didn't run. He stayed between me and the attackers, took a hit, protected me like he knew I mattered to you." Megan swallowed hard. "That's what he does." Back in the truck, Lexi uploaded the last file they'd decrypted. She tapped Megan's shoulder. "There's a list, embedded in a hidden node on the tablet. Rogue agents, dirty cops, embedded operatives, and Megan." She turned the screen. The name at the top blinked in stark white letters. Kane Riley, active asset. Megan's breath caught. The truck idled in place. "That's not possible," she said. "He died 5 years ago." "Columbia?" Lexi shook her head. "Apparently not. He's not only alive, he's inside the syndicate. And he's one of the ones moving Anka." Delta sat in the back seat, quiet as stone, but his ears twitched. "What now?" Lexi asked. Megan stared out at the dark road ahead. "Now we find the place the world forgot, and we finish what we started." The rain came down in sheets, hammering the rooftop of the old utility building like fists. From her perch on the ridge, Megan Carver could just barely make out the faint glow of sodium lights beneath the dense tree canopy. A cluster of buildings in neat rows, surrounded by a double-layered fence and tall cameras that rotated with mechanical patience. The Wildgate Wildlife Research Center. Except it wasn't. "This isn't a conservation hub." Lexi's voice crackled over the comms from her van, tucked a mile away in the woods. "It's a shell. Public funding, glossy website, fake field reports. But underground? That's where they're pulling venom, testing nerve agents. And that's where Anka is." Megan lay prone, drenched and silent, the butt of her rifle nestled into her shoulder. Beside her, Delta didn't flinch at the thunder. His eyes tracked the patrol pattern of a guard walking along the fence's outer loop. Calm, watching, waiting. "We go in through the service tunnel," Megan whispered. "Blueprints show a backup flood system running beneath the south lot. It connects to sublevel 1. "And sublevel 2? Lexi asked. "Because the tablet shows that's where the ghosts are." "I'll handle sublevel 2. There was a pause. Then Lexi's voice softened. "Megan, Riley Kane is listed as Chief of Internal Operations for this site. If you find him, I'm not here for closure. I'm here for the animals." Megan's voice didn't waver. "I'll deal with him if I have to." 10 minutes later, she and Delta slipped through the back fence beneath a blind spot in the camera loop, submerged themselves in the icy runoff ditch, and slid into the old maintenance shaft. It reeked of mold and rust, but the tunnel held just wide enough for Megan to crawl, just high enough for Delta to pad ahead silently. They emerged behind the central compound, crouched in a blind curve of the building. Megan popped a rusted hatch, and they slipped into the flood control corridor. It was quiet, too quiet. "This place should be humming," she murmured. "Labs like this run 24/7. The hum of machines was there, low, distant, But the human noise was strangely absent. No conversations, no footsteps, no clatter of lab carts. Delta stopped at a sealed door. His ears went up, his whole body bristling. "What is it, boy?" He growled, low and soft, then looked up at her. Megan typed the override code from the decrypted data on the tablet. The door hissed open. They stepped into a hallway lined with glass chambers. Cages, dozens of them. Inside were sedated animals. Ocelots, slow lorises, crowned lemurs, some covered in wires, others trembling from chemical withdrawal. A sign near one cage read, "Specimen number 014, behavioral response, dopamine inhibition, phase 2. Megan's heart turned cold. "They're not just pulling venom," she whispered. "They're testing compounds on them, modifying behavior." Delta padded forward and suddenly stopped. His body went rigid. Megan followed his gaze, and her breath caught. At the end of the row, barely lit by flickering overheads, was a narrow enclosure, more containment cell than habitat. Inside was a white-faced capuchin, Anka. Her fur was patchy, her frame thin, but the dark rings around her eyes were unmistakable. Delta gave a soft whine and approached. Anka blinked. Her fingers curled around the cage bars. Her head tilted like she remembered the scent. "Lexi," Megan whispered. "We found her. Anka's alive. I'm pulling video now. We're going live in 5 minutes. Get the uplink ready." As Megan crouched to check Anka's vitals, a soft click echoed behind her. Cold metal pressed against the back of her neck. "Always knew you were a terrible ghost," said a voice she hadn't heard in 5 years. Megan didn't move. "Riley, you shouldn't be here." She slowly stood and turned to face him. He looked older, lean, hard, grayer at the temples, but those eyes were still the same sharp blue. Only now they were colder. "You faked your death," Megan said. "You let me take the fall for Columbia. You let them bury me." "I saved you," he said, voice tight. "They would have killed you. I had to vanish to finish the job from the inside. You finished it? You're running this hellhole. I'm preventing a war." He glanced at Delta, who hadn't moved, just stood between them like a wall of muscle and instinct. The syndicate would have found another site, another handler. At least here I have some control. "You call this control?" Megan gestured at the cages. "You're experimenting on endangered species and weaponizing their biology. I've kept worse things from getting out. You could have exposed them." Riley's jaw tightened. "And then what?" "DHS is full of moles. The agency that burned you burned me, too." Megan shook her head. You chose this." She took a breath. "And I'm choosing to end it." She hit the comm on her belt. "Lexi, now." A soft chirp confirmed the stream was live. Riley's eyes narrowed. "What did you do?" "I'm not killing you," Megan said, stepping aside. "But I am giving the world a front row seat." The red light on the uplink pulsed. Satellite feed engaged. Lexi's voice whispered in her ear. "We're broadcasting." Riley hesitated, his pistol lowered. "You don't understand." Delta lunged. In a blink, the dog slammed into Riley's side, sending him sprawling. Megan kicked the gun away and pressed her boot into his chest. "You remember what Delta was trained for, don't you?" she hissed. Riley just stared at her. There was no fight left, just the quiet look of a man who'd been running too long. Alarms began to blare. "Megan," Lexi warned, "I just intercepted facility comms. Kill team inbound. 27 minutes to detonation. They're wiping the place." Megan looked at Anka's cage, then the others. "We're not leaving anyone behind," she said. And Delta, as if understanding every word, ran to help. The moment the klaxon blared, everything shifted. Red warning lights flickered to life. A computerized voice echoed through the underground corridor. Facility breach detected. Emergency protocol initiated. Evacuation advised. Detonation countdown 26 minutes, 54 seconds. Megan tightened the strap on her gear, grabbed Anka's cage, and swung it onto Delta's modified harness. The Capuchin stirred slightly but didn't resist. Whatever cocktail they'd pumped her with was wearing thin, but time was thinner. Lexi, status, Megan barked into her comms. I've overridden the internal lock on the old flood tunnel, Lexi replied. It exits half a mile downslope from the compound. But you've got to move. They've got boots inbound from the east. Looks like private military. ETA? 15 minutes max, maybe less. And Megan, this place is wired to go up like a bonfire on rocket fuel. Copy. We're moving. Megan turned to Delta. Lead. The shepherd didn't hesitate. He pivoted and shot down the left corridor, skimming past flickering lights and past trembling cages of forgotten creatures. Megan followed, adrenaline punching through the fatigue. Her boots splashed through rising water as they entered the Backp flood channel. Rusted grates, moss-slick steps, the scent of rot. She'd seen worse. But the fear in the eyes of the animals they passed, that stuck like splinters. They reached the sublevel stairwell. On the next floor up, 2 more primates were caged, one a spider monkey with half-shaved limbs and an IV drip still dangling from its arm. The other, a small bonobo, huddled under a stained towel. Lexi, how much can the drone lift? Maybe 10 pounds. Why? I'm giving it the evidence case. You're uploading the full dump to every outlet on your list. Media, whistleblower sites, international wildlife watchdogs. If we don't make it, the truth does. There was a brief pause. You got it, Lexi said, but if you don't make it, I'm coming to haunt your ghost myself. Megan gave a dry, bitter smile. Deal. Delta whined softly. Urgent. Megan turned. The bonobo stared back at her with wide, panicked eyes. We're not leaving them, she muttered. Not this time. She unlatched both cages, attached makeshift slings from straps and harness loops, and gently transferred the sedated monkeys onto a rolling gurney from the lab hallway. Delta nudged one, checking vitals. Then, as if on cue, stepped beside it and shouldered the weight of one side with practiced ease. They ran. The emergency tunnel was half collapsed in places, lined with mildew and rust. Megan's hands slipped on the wet steel rungs of the maintenance ladder. Her knees screamed. Her shoulder throbbed from the weight. But she didn't stop. Not when the lives she'd once failed clung to her now, silent, breathing, alive. 10 minutes to impact, Lexi warned. And Megan? They've found your vehicle. You need to reroute to the Western Ridge extraction. Copy. Updating path. Delta slowed briefly at a junction. His ears twitched. A growl rose low in his throat. A shadow moved ahead. Riley. He stood in the corridor, breathing hard, gun lowered. His free hand bled from a bite mark. Delta's, no doubt. But there was no rage in his eyes, just bone-deep weariness. You're not gonna make it that way, he said. Main exit's blocked. Get out of our way, Megan snapped, panting. I can help. There's an old ventilation corridor off the observation deck. I used it once. Before. Delta growled. Megan met Riley's eyes. Why should I trust you now? You shouldn't, he said simply. But I've got less than 10 minutes to prove I'm not who you think I became. That was the thing with trust. It was a knife's edge. But time had no patience for indecision. Lead us, Megan said. They moved fast. The facility groaned above them, as if it too was preparing to die. Overhead, a loud rumble signaled the first detonation, likely a decoy, but the final one wouldn't bluff. The corridor narrowed, then opened into a great walled duct barely large enough to crawl. The primates were passed forward one by one. Delta went last, paws scraping against metal, then sunlight. A blast of fresh, cold mountain air hit Megan's face as they emerged onto the ridge. A waiting chopper crested the tree line, unmarked, black, silent. Lexi's voice came through again. "Megan, I see you. 5 minutes and closing. Come on." The rescue crew met them in the clearing. Crates opened, medical hands reached. Sedated bodies were loaded carefully. Anka's fingers curled weakly around Megan's wrist before she was lifted aboard. Then a rustle in the woods. A flash of movement. A gunshot cracked. Riley stumbled from the tree line, clutching his side. Delta launched before Megan even saw the second man. A masked shooter sprinting through the brush. The shepherd tackled him mid-stride, knocking him to the ground with a bone-shaking growl. The soldier tried to fight. Delta didn't give him a second chance. By the time Megan reached them, Delta was standing, chest heaving, eyes blazing. The shooter didn't move again. Riley knelt beside a boulder, coughing blood. "Guess I finally took a hit that counts," he muttered. "You shouldn't have come back," Megan said, helping him sit. "I had to. I couldn't let it end with you thinking I was lost." He handed her something, a flash drive. "Evidence, all of it, my inside logs. It's not redemption, but it's the truth." Then he laughed, a broken sound. "You always were better at walking away clean." A final explosion thundered from the valley behind them. A fireball erupted in the distance, lighting the clouds in a sickly orange bloom. The facility was gone. So were the cages, and maybe, for the first time, so was the weight. 2 weeks later, in a green valley at the base of Wind Hollow Ridge, a temporary wildlife rehab center buzzed with soft noise. Birds chirped. Monkeys chattered. And in a large enclosed grove, Anka swung between trees with surprising strength. Megan watched from the hill, arms crossed, heart full. Behind her, Lexi hammered away at a laptop under a canvas awning, coordinating volunteers for their new foundation, Wild Vow. Elijah Brody, arm in a sling, was doing rounds on the animals, gently checking vitals and talking like they could understand every word. Delta lay beside Megan, tail thumping softly. "You did good," she said, her voice barely more than a whisper. He looked up at her with those intelligent, haunted eyes, the ones that had first pierced the fog and pulled her back from the edge. She knelt, scratched behind his ears. "You didn't just bring back evidence. You brought back everything I forgot I believed in." Delta nuzzled her shoulder. Megan smiled. "We're not ghosts anymore." And in the distance, the wind carried nothing but peace.